Black Phone 2 is a 2025 American supernatural horror film that continues the story begun in The Black Phone, which captured audiences with its intense atmosphere, psychological tension, and the chilling presence of the masked serial killer known as the Grabber. The film was directed by Scott Derrickson, who returned after the first installment with the same creative vision, aiming to expand the mythology of the Black Phone while deepening the psychological and emotional complexity of its characters. The screenplay was co-written by Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill, who together crafted a story that combined elements of suspense, mystery, supernatural horror, and family drama. The film was produced by Blumhouse Productions and Crooked Highway, with Jason Blum, Scott Derrickson, and C. Robert Cargill serving as producers. Universal Pictures handled worldwide distribution, ensuring that the film reached a wide international audience. The runtime of the film is approximately 114 minutes, and it carries an R rating for strong violent content, language, and intense horror scenes, which are a hallmark of the series. The production budget was around $30 million, and the film managed to gross over $130 million worldwide, marking it as a commercially successful horror sequel. The story of Black Phone 2 takes place 4 years after the events of the first film. Finney Blake, who survived a kidnapping by the Grabber as a child, is now 17 years old and still dealing with the psychological consequences of his traumatic experience. The Grabber, who was seemingly defeated at the end of the first film, continues to exert influence in a more sinister, supernatural form, demonstrating that the evil associated with the Black Phone has transcended death. Finney's younger sister, Gwen, who is 15, begins experiencing vivid and disturbing visions, often accompanied by the eerie sound of a ringing black phone in her dreams. These visions are not random, they consistently show 3 boys in peril, being stalked at a remote and isolated location known as Alpine Lake, a winter camp far removed from populated areas. As Gwen's experiences intensify, she realizes that these events are connected to her family and to the past horrors inflicted by the Grabber, suggesting a continuing cycle of terror that the siblings must confront. Gwen's psychic sensitivity and determination drive much of the plot. She convinces Finney to accompany her to Alpine Lake during a severe winter storm, believing that understanding the origins and purpose of her visions is crucial to stopping the evil before it claims more victims. The setting itself adds to the tension of the narrative, with snow-covered forests, icy lakes, and isolated cabins contributing to a sense of claustrophobia and danger. Every rustle of wind, creaking of branches, or crunch of footsteps in the snow heightens the suspense. The supernatural elements are carefully intertwined with the characters' personal histories, so the audience experiences both the terror of the unknown and the emotional weight of trauma that lingers years after the initial events of the first film. The Grabber, portrayed once again by Ethan Hawke, returns not merely as a physical threat but as a spectral presence whose influence extends into dreams, memories, and psychic phenomena. His character embodies the idea that evil is not confined to mortality but can persist through fear and the lingering resonance of violent acts. The narrative emphasizes that the Grabber's legacy is not only in the physical harm he caused but also in the psychological scars left on his victims and their families. This thematic depth distinguishes the sequel from many typical horror films, as it focuses not only on scares but also on the long-term consequences of trauma and the ways in which survivors attempt to reclaim control over their lives. Mason Thames reprises his role as Finney Blake, bringing a maturity and complexity to the character that reflects the passage of 4 years and the ongoing impact of his childhood trauma. Finney's evolution from a frightened child to a young adult confronting supernatural and psychological threats is central to the emotional resonance of the story. Madeline McGraw returns as Gwen Blake, whose psychic abilities and courage are essential to uncovering the mysteries surrounding the Black Phone. Gwen is portrayed as intelligent, resourceful, and deeply empathetic, providing a counterbalance to Finney's cautious and often hesitant approach. Jeremy Davies reprises his role as Terrence Blake, the father, whose attempts to protect his children and manage his own feelings of helplessness add depth to the family dynamics depicted on screen. Damien Beecher joins the cast as a new character connected to Alpine Lake, contributing to the unfolding mystery and adding narrative complexity. The supporting cast includes Miguel Mora, Ariana Rivas, Anna Lore, Graham Abbey, and Maeve Beatty, each playing roles that intertwine with the central plot. Their characters provide additional context, narrative subplots, and opportunities to explore the larger supernatural elements of the story. Each performance contributes to the atmosphere of tension and unease, helping to create a fully realized world in which both human and supernatural forces interact. Production of Black Phone 2 involved careful planning to maintain continuity with the first film while expanding the visual and narrative scope. Filming took place primarily in Canada, where the snowy landscapes and remote locations provided the perfect backdrop for the story's winter setting. Cinematographer Per M. Ekberg used lighting, camera angles, and environmental effects to enhance the feeling of isolation, dread, and suspense. The screenplay was developed to balance moments of intense horror with quieter, character-driven scenes that explore the emotional aftermath of past trauma. Joe Hill, whose short story inspired the first film, served as an executive producer on the sequel, ensuring that the adaptation remained true to the spirit of the original material while allowing for creative expansion. The film was initially scheduled for a June 27, 2025 release but was postponed to October 17, 2025, to coincide with the Halloween season. This timing was advantageous for maximizing audience interest in horror films. The film premiered at Fantastic Fest on September 20, 2025, a festival renowned for highlighting genre films and attracting devoted horror audiences. Its wide release ensured that the movie was available to mainstream viewers at the peak of the fall horror season, contributing to its strong box office performance. Marketing for the film included trailers that emphasized both the continuity of the story and the expansion of its supernatural elements. Audiences saw glimpses of snow-covered forests, haunted cabins, spectral phone calls, and figures stalking through the darkness, all accompanied by tense sound design and foreboding music. Merchandise, including themed collectibles and promotional items, was released to engage fans and create an interactive connection with the film's universe. The narrative of Black Phone 2 explores complex themes, including the persistence of evil, the impact of trauma on families, and the ways in which survivors navigate fear and reclaim agency. By blending psychological horror with supernatural elements, the film distinguishes itself from conventional thrillers, offering both scares and emotional depth. The resolution of the plot builds on the mythology established in the first film while introducing new challenges and expanding the scope of the story to include unexplored supernatural connections. As Black Phone 2 continues to unfold, the narrative richness becomes evident in the detailed exploration of secondary characters and minor subplots that intersect with Finney and Gwen's journey. These characters, though not central, add texture and complexity to the story, highlighting the pervasive reach of the grabber's influence and reinforcing the film's themes of fear, resilience, and moral choice. One of the notable secondary characters is a camp counselor who initially appears benign and supportive. Through a series of carefully constructed interactions, it is revealed that he harbors knowledge of the camp's dark past, including previous disappearances linked to the grabber. His internal conflict, between protecting the campers and revealing the full truth, adds a layer of tension and moral ambiguity. The counselor's struggle demonstrates the recurring theme that confronting evil requires not only courage but also ethical discernment, and that decisions made in moments of fear have lasting consequences. Another subplot involves a group of campers who inadvertently stumble upon hidden areas connected to the grabber's previous victims. These sequences serve multiple functions. They provide suspenseful set pieces, expand the lore of the camp, and illustrate the pervasive danger that exists beyond Finney and Gwen's immediate focus. The campers' fates, often tragic, reinforce the stakes and highlight the indiscriminate nature of the supernatural threat. Ernesto's arc, while central to assisting the protagonists, also develops through interactions with these secondary characters. He functions as both a guide and a moral compass, providing strategic insight and emotional support. His character demonstrates that heroism in the narrative is multifaceted, requiring not just bravery but also empathy, collaboration, and adaptability under pressure. Visually, these sequences are enhanced by cinematography that emphasizes perspective, framing, and environmental storytelling. For instance, long shots of campers wandering through snow-laden forests create a sense of isolation and vulnerability, while sudden close-ups of eyes, hands, or glimpses of the grabber's masked visage heighten tension. The use of sound, creaking floors, distant whispers, and abrupt silences, amplifies the atmosphere of dread, making the audience feel the character's fear on a visceral level. A particularly memorable minor subplot involves Gwen experiencing visions of previous victims reaching out through the black phone. These interactions are both terrifying and emotionally poignant, revealing the human cost of the grabber's reign and offering guidance that proves crucial to navigating the camp's hidden dangers. These sequences explore the concept of memory, loss, and the persistence of trauma, reinforcing the film's overarching themes while providing narrative depth. The film also employs symbolic motifs to connect secondary plots with the main narrative. Shadows, reflections, and recurring imagery associated with the black phone appear in the minor arcs, linking seemingly isolated events to the broader supernatural mythology. This careful integration ensures that every subplot contributes to narrative cohesion and thematic resonance. Interpersonal dynamics among secondary characters further enhance tension. Rivalries, misunderstandings, and moments of vulnerability create opportunities for both suspense and emotional engagement. These interactions underscore the idea that fear and courage manifest differently in each individual, and that collective experiences of trauma can vary widely even within the same environment. Another subplot revolves around a hidden room beneath the camp that contains artifacts and clues from past events. The exploration of this space involves a combination of suspenseful physical navigation and psychological challenge, as the characters confront manifestations of fear projected through the grabber's lingering influence. These sequences are meticulously choreographed, blending practical effects, lighting, and sound design to maintain a balance between suspense, horror, and narrative progression. Throughout these minor arcs, the black phone serves as a unifying element, connecting all characters, major and minor, to the supernatural threat. Its recurring presence emphasizes continuity, legacy, and the moral dimension of communication with forces beyond the natural world. By integrating these subplots seamlessly into the main narrative, the film achieves a layered storytelling approach that rewards attentive viewers and deepens the immersive experience. As the story approaches the climax, the consequences of these minor arcs converge. Characters who previously seemed peripheral become essential to the resolution, either by providing critical information, making sacrifices, or illustrating the human cost of confronting evil. This convergence reinforces the film's narrative sophistication, demonstrating that every character, subplot, and detail contributes meaningfully to the overarching story. The thematic richness is further enhanced by the exploration of courage in different forms. While Finney and Gwen demonstrate heroism through direct confrontation and strategic thinking, secondary characters show bravery in subtler ways, through moral decision-making, protection of others, or endurance in the face of overwhelming fear. This multiplicity of courage underscores the film's message that resilience is multifaceted and often manifests in unexpected ways. Cinematic techniques continue to elevate these minor arcs. The use of long takes, varying focal lengths, and dynamic camera movements highlight spatial awareness and environmental tension. Snow and ice, omnipresent in the winter camp setting, function both as aesthetic elements and as narrative devices, representing isolation, vulnerability, and the passage of time. Soundscapes complement these visual cues, with environmental noises, musical motifs, and diegetic sounds creating a sensory landscape that immerses the audience fully in the characters' experiences. The film's editing is equally important, particularly in weaving together main and secondary storylines. Cross-cutting between Finney and Gwen's exploration, the experiences of minor characters, and manifestations of the grabber maintain suspense while gradually revealing connections and plot points. This approach ensures that tension is sustained across multiple narrative threads, enhancing engagement and emotional impact. Symbolically, the secondary arcs reinforce the primary themes of Black Phone 2. Isolation, vulnerability, moral choice, and the persistence of trauma are explored not only through the protagonists but also through the experiences of those who encounter the supernatural threat in varied ways. This narrative layering strengthens the film's resonance, making it more than a conventional horror story. The inclusion of minor arcs also allows the filmmakers to explore psychological and thematic complexity without detracting from the central storyline. For instance, the impact of witnessing supernatural occurrences, the ethical dilemmas associated with survival, and the interpersonal dynamics among secondary characters provide depth and texture, enriching the audience's understanding of the narrative world. In conclusion, these minor subplots, secondary character arcs, and detailed scene developments contribute significantly to Black Phone 2's overall impact. By integrating suspense, supernatural elements, psychological tension, and thematic resonance, the film ensures that every narrative thread serves a purpose, whether to heighten terror, develop character, or reinforce central themes. This approach creates a cinematic experience that is both immersive and intellectually engaging, with a richness that rewards careful viewing and thoughtful analysis. The film's meticulous attention to narrative layering, character complexity, and thematic depth distinguishes it as a sophisticated sequel that honors the original while expanding its universe, providing audiences with a multifaceted, emotionally compelling, and terrifying journey through horror, resilience, and human courage. One of the most striking aspects of Black Phone 2 is its deliberate pacing and construction of suspense through carefully choreographed scenes. The opening sequences establish a deceptive sense of normalcy. The camera lingers on small, everyday interactions between Finney, Gwen, and other campers, creating a sense of calm and familiarity that makes the ensuing horror even more jarring. Early visual motifs, such as the stark contrast between the warm interiors of the cabins and the frozen expanse outside, subtly foreshadow the isolation and danger to come. Snow falling silently across the landscape, the crunch of footsteps on ice, and the distant cawing of unseen birds serve as understated auditory cues that something is not quite right, establishing tension long before the supernatural elements manifest. These careful choices reflect an understanding that suspense is built as much through anticipation as through explicit scares. As the narrative progresses, the film increasingly relies on the intersection of environmental and psychological horror. Snowstorms and blizzards are used not merely for dramatic effect but to amplify character vulnerability. Characters become disoriented, separated, and physically challenged, forcing them to confront their fears in both literal and symbolic landscapes. In one particularly tense sequence, Gwen navigates a labyrinthine set of frozen paths while experiencing a vision of a past murder connected to the camp. The scene's tension arises from both the immediate physical peril and the psychological terror of the vision itself. By intertwining these elements, the film ensures that horror is multidimensional, operating simultaneously on the sensory, emotional, and intellectual levels. The climax of Black Phone 2 exemplifies the careful orchestration of suspense and emotional payoff. As Finney and Gwen confront the spectral presence of the grabber, the narrative layers multiple sources of tension: the physical environment, the unpredictable supernatural phenomena, and the emotional stakes rooted in sibling bonds. Visual and auditory elements converge to heighten suspense. Shadows move in ways that suggest life where there is none, the Black Phone emits ominous tones, and the soundscape alternates between silence and sudden, sharp crescendos that mirror the character's heightened awareness. The confrontation is as much about psychological resilience as it is about surviving a supernatural threat, underscoring the film's thematic commitment to exploring trauma and courage. Symbolism is woven throughout the film in ways that reward attentive viewers. The Black Phone, central to the franchise, functions as a nexus between the living and the dead, past and present, conscious and subconscious. Each ringing represents both danger and revelation, forcing characters to confront truths they might otherwise ignore. Snow and ice, recurring visual motifs, symbolize emotional paralysis, isolation, and the chilling persistence of past horrors. The forested landscapes surrounding Alpine Lake Camp act as both literal and figurative barriers, embodying the uncertainty and complexity of human consciousness when faced with fear. Even minor visual details, the way light reflects off ice, shadows cast by flickering lanterns, or subtle movements in the periphery, contribute to a layered narrative in which every frame communicates meaning beyond its surface appearance. Marketing strategies for Black Phone 2 were carefully designed to maximize engagement while preserving the film's mystery. Promotional trailers emphasized the return of core characters and the expanded supernatural mythology without revealing critical plot points. Posters highlighted the stark winter setting, the Black Phone, and the shadowy presence of the grabber, creating intrigue and anticipation. Social media campaigns encouraged fans to speculate about plot developments, share theories, and engage with interactive content, fostering a sense of community and investment in the narrative. Behind-the-scenes footage revealed production design, special effects, and the actors' preparation for emotionally demanding roles, reinforcing the film's commitment to quality and depth. The combination of traditional marketing, digital engagement, and targeted messaging created a sustained buzz that contributed to its strong opening at the box office. Audience reception highlighted the film's effectiveness in blending psychological depth with supernatural horror. Fans of the original praised the continuation of character arcs, particularly the evolution of Finney and Gwen, and the return of Ethan Hawke as the Grabber. Critics noted that the sequel expanded the franchise's mythology without sacrificing the emotional resonance that distinguished the first film. Some commentary focused on the ambitious scale of the narrative, acknowledging that while the broader scope introduced complexity, it also allowed for richer character development and more nuanced thematic exploration. Overall, the balance between suspense, emotional depth, and supernatural elements was widely recognized as a key factor in the film's critical and commercial success. Thematically, Black Phone 2 explores enduring questions about the nature of trauma, the persistence of evil, and the ways in which human relationships mediate experience. The siblings' journey is emblematic of the struggle to reconcile past horrors with present realities, highlighting the ways in which fear, memory, and courage intersect. Gwen's psychic abilities serve as a metaphor for heightened sensitivity to emotional truths, while Finney's experiences reflect the lasting impact of survival and the challenge of reclaiming agency after trauma. The environmental setting amplifies these themes, using isolation, cold, and darkness as extensions of internal psychological states. By interweaving human, environmental, and supernatural factors, the film situates its horror within a broader exploration of resilience, morality, and the human capacity to confront darkness. In addition to its narrative and thematic achievements, Black Phone 2 also engages in dialogue with broader horror traditions. The film draws on familiar motifs, isolated settings, malevolent spirits, and psychological tension, while innovating through its focus on character-driven terror and psychic phenomena. Comparisons to other contemporary horror franchises reveal a deliberate attempt to balance genre expectations with thematic sophistication. Unlike horror films that rely primarily on jump scares or graphic violence, Black Phone 2 invests in character psychology, moral dilemmas, and symbolic storytelling, elevating it within the landscape of modern horror cinema. This approach situates the film as both a continuation of traditional horror and a contribution to the evolution of the genre, demonstrating that effective terror can be both emotionally resonant and intellectually engaging. One of the most compelling aspects of Black Phone 2 lies in its exploration of enduring themes such as trauma, resilience, and the nature of evil. The sequel expands upon the psychological and emotional framework established in the first film, delving into the long-term consequences of surviving extreme trauma. Finney's character embodies the struggle to reconcile past horrors with present challenges, illustrating how trauma can both weaken and strengthen an individual. Gwen's character complements this exploration, representing the transformative power of courage, empathy, and moral clarity in the face of incomprehensible danger. The narrative suggests that confronting fear is not merely a matter of physical survival but a process of emotional growth and understanding, emphasizing that true bravery is intertwined with the ability to process and integrate traumatic experiences. Symbolism is intricately woven throughout the film, with the black phone serving as the most prominent motif. In addition to functioning as a literal conduit between the living and the dead, it symbolizes memory, connection, and the persistent influence of unresolved trauma. Each call from the phone is both a warning and a revelation, linking past events with present choices, and ultimately guiding the protagonists toward insight and survival. The winterbound alpine lake setting operates as a broader metaphor for isolation, uncertainty, and the harshness of the challenges the characters must face. Snow, ice, and dense forests are not mere aesthetic choices but narrative tools, reflecting the cold, impenetrable nature of the obstacles, both physical and psychological, that Finney and Gwen must navigate. Comparisons with the first film highlight the sequel's evolution in both narrative scope and thematic depth. While the original Black Phone primarily centered on confined physical spaces, suspenseful sequences, and a single protagonist's survival, the sequel expands the universe by introducing new locations, additional characters, and multi-layered supernatural threats. This broader canvas allows for a more complex exploration of character dynamics, particularly the sibling relationship between Finney and Gwen, which becomes central to the narrative. The sequel retains the signature elements that made the first film compelling: claustrophobic tension, suspenseful pacing, and effective use of horror tropes, while introducing innovations that deepen the psychological and thematic resonance. Cinematic techniques in Black Phone 2 play a pivotal role in creating tension and guiding the audience's emotional response. The film employs dynamic camera movements, including tight close-ups and long tracking shots, to immerse viewers in the protagonist's experiences. Close-ups capture subtle expressions of fear, determination, and moral deliberation, enhancing the emotional engagement. Tracking shots through snow-laden forests or desolate cabins convey both physical and psychological movement, drawing the audience into the protagonist's journey while maintaining suspense. Lighting choices emphasize contrasts between shadow and illumination, often using dim, naturalistic sources that heighten the sense of vulnerability while making sudden bursts of light, such as the glow of the Black Phone, significant narrative cues. Sound design and music composition further amplify the horror and thematic undertones. Environmental sounds, such as wind whistling through trees, ice cracking underfoot, and the echo of distant voices, create an immersive, unsettling atmosphere. The Black Phone's ringing is strategically integrated, becoming a leitmotif that signals tension, impending revelation, or supernatural intrusion. The musical score alternates between haunting minimalism during suspenseful or introspective moments and crescendos that heighten terror during climactic sequences. This careful orchestration of auditory elements ensures that tension is sustained without relying solely on visual scares, making the horror experience multisensory and psychologically compelling. The sequel also explores moral and ethical dilemmas, particularly in the siblings' decisions regarding trust, intervention, and survival. Characters must constantly weigh the consequences of action or inaction, and these moments of choice are interlaced with supernatural prompts from the Black Phone, creating an interplay between agency and external influence. The narrative suggests that moral courage, doing what is right despite fear or uncertainty, is as crucial as physical courage, reinforcing the film's overarching themes of resilience and personal growth. These ethical layers provide depth, distinguishing the film from conventional horror by integrating philosophical reflection alongside visceral suspense. In addition to thematic and cinematic analysis, Black Phone 2 employs intertextuality and references to broader horror traditions. Its use of masks, isolated settings, and the blurring of reality and supernatural influence resonates with classic horror motifs while remaining innovative in execution. The film honors its source material, derived from Joe Hill's original concept, while expanding it into a multidimensional narrative that blends supernatural horror with psychological exploration. This combination of homage and innovation positions the sequel as both a continuation of an established story and a standalone exploration of fear, memory, and resilience. As the story progresses, Finney, Gwen, and Ernesto begin piecing together the deeper mechanics of the grabber's lingering influence. Through the Black Phone, Gwen communicates with the spirits of the children who had previously been victims, learning not only their locations but also the nature of the supernatural hold that binds them to the camp. These spirits reveal that the grabber's death did not end his power, as his violent intentions have been amplified by the unresolved trauma and fear he left behind. This connection between past and present victims forms the central narrative device for the sequel, showing how evil can perpetuate itself when fear and trauma remain unaddressed. Gwen's psychic ability intensifies as she immerses herself in these communications, and she begins to experience shared memories of the past victims' final moments, giving her both crucial information and a sense of urgency. Meanwhile, the environment of Alpine Lake begins to change in response to the trio's actions and the supernatural presence. Corridors stretch unnaturally, lights flicker in patterns that seem to mimic the Black Phone's dial tone, and echoes of whispers fill the empty cabins. Finney, initially skeptical of Gwen's visions, starts experiencing moments of déjà vu and spectral interactions that echo his own previous abduction. These experiences blur the line between the living and the supernatural, emphasizing the film's theme of trauma as a pervasive, living force. Ernesto serves as a grounding character, attempting to balance skepticism with loyalty, often acting as the intermediary between Gwen's psychic instincts and Finney's pragmatic, albeit traumatized, perspective. The tension escalates when the group discovers that the three boys are being held in a hidden section of the camp, a space that exists partially in the physical world and partially in a supernatural liminal zone shaped by the grabber's malevolent influence. Accessing this space requires the trio to use both physical strategy and spiritual guidance from the Black Phone. As they navigate these treacherous corridors and frozen outdoor areas, the story employs increasingly intense visual and auditory cues to heighten suspense. Shadows move independently, distant voices call out in distress, and the cold itself seems weaponized, making survival a test of both courage and psychological resilience. During a pivotal sequence, Gwen experiences a fully immersive vision where she sees through the eyes of one of the trapped boys. This sequence reveals the method by which the grabber's residual power manipulates perception and isolates victims, showing the psychological terror imposed on the children as their surroundings warp and the threat feels inescapable. The vision ends with Gwen being forced to confront the grabber's spectral manifestation directly, a moment that tests her psychic strength and emotional fortitude. This encounter reinforces the stakes and demonstrates that the supernatural threat, while rooted in the past, is very much alive in the present. The character's journey is complicated by Armando, the camp supervisor, whose initial disbelief and attempts at control put him at odds with Finney, Gwen, and Ernesto. While he intends to protect the campers, his reliance on rationality blinds him to the supernatural danger, delaying crucial decisions and heightening risk. Mustang, Armando's niece, becomes a valuable ally after witnessing unexplained phenomena and realizing that the trio's warnings are credible. Her knowledge of the camp's layout and her willingness to trust Gwen's instincts provide key support during the climactic confrontation. As the trio reaches the hidden location of the trapped boys, they discover that the grabber's ghost has created physical manifestations that mimic his former self, drawing on the fear of both the new victims and the survivors. These manifestations act as guardians of the liminal space, attempting to trap the protagonists in a cycle of fear. Finney, Gwen, and Ernesto use a combination of physical ingenuity, knowledge from the spirits communicated through the Black Phone, and Gwen's psychic abilities to navigate these dangers. The suspense builds to a near-constant crescendo as the supernatural environment reacts dynamically, creating challenges that are both external and internal, testing the limits of the character's courage and unity. The narrative reaches its climax as Gwen establishes a direct psychic connection with the grabber's residual presence. In a tense and surreal sequence, she confronts the essence of his evil, drawing upon the guidance of the spirits and the emotional strength of her bond with Finney. The confrontation is both mental and emotional. The grabber attempts to manipulate fear and induce despair, exploiting the character's deepest anxieties. Gwen counters by channeling the combined resilience and hope of the previous victims, creating a psychic pushback that begins to unravel the malevolent hold on the camp. The Black Phone acts as the conduit through which this final struggle is coordinated, connecting the living and the dead in a battle for liberation. Meanwhile, Finney and Ernesto assist by physically clearing obstacles and protecting the trapped boys, who are disoriented and frightened. The interactions between the living and spectral forces create moments of extreme suspense, as the boundary between reality and vision constantly shifts. The tension is compounded by the camp's environment, which continues to react unpredictably, including collapsing structures, sudden snow drifts, and areas of blinding fog. These elements heighten the stakes, emphasizing that the confrontation is not only against a ghostly villain but also against the psychological strain imposed by the supernatural setting. The resolution of the climactic sequence occurs when Gwen successfully channels the collective will of the previous victims, diminishing the grabber's residual power and breaking the hold over the trapped boys. The spirits of the past victims ascend, symbolizing closure, while the new victims are freed physically and psychologically. The narrative emphasizes the importance of understanding trauma, acknowledging the past, and working collaboratively to overcome lingering evil. The spectral manifestations fade, leaving the camp quiet, though the film subtly hints that supernatural forces remain in the world, suggesting potential future threats. After the climactic events, the film spends time showing the aftermath and character development. Finney and Gwen process their experiences, reflecting on the enduring effects of trauma and the ways in which courage, empathy, and communication allowed them to overcome extraordinary danger. Ernesto's loyalty and bravery are recognized, and Mustang and Armando reconcile, acknowledging that the events forced them to confront realities beyond their rational understanding. The rescued boys are reunited with their families, bringing emotional closure to the immediate storyline, though the thematic undercurrents of lingering fear and trauma remain subtly present. The cinematography throughout these sequences emphasizes the interplay between light and shadow, the starkness of the snowy environment, and the claustrophobic interiors of the camp. Editing choices create tension by alternating between intense, fast-paced sequences and quiet, reflective moments that give the audience space to understand the psychological impact on the characters. The score complements this rhythm, building suspense through low-frequency tones and sudden dynamic shifts while providing melodic cues to underscore emotional revelations. The combination of these elements creates a cohesive narrative that intertwines physical, supernatural, and psychological layers, allowing the film to function simultaneously as a horror story and a study of trauma. As the narrative of Black Phone 2 moves toward its final sequences, the tension reaches an apex that seamlessly integrates suspense, horror, and psychological drama. Following the convergence of minor subplots with the main storyline, the siblings, Finney and Gwen, are now fully aware of the scope of the grabber's lingering influence and the supernatural mechanisms at play. Their understanding of the Black Phone as both a conduit and a symbol of unresolved trauma becomes central to their strategy. Each scene in the final act is meticulously crafted to balance visual horror with narrative progression. For example, the sequence in which Finney navigates the underground tunnels beneath Alpine Lake combines claustrophobic framing with stark contrasts between shadow and light. The flickering illumination highlights the uncertainty of the environment while visually symbolizing the struggle between fear and courage. Gwen, guided by her visions, navigates adjacent passages, the editing cross-cutting between siblings creating a tense rhythm that reinforces their psychological and physical parallel journeys. Sound design intensifies these sequences. Echoes of footsteps, the whispering remnants of the grabber's victims, and the recurrent ominous hum of the Black Phone establish a layered auditory landscape. Silence is employed strategically, amplifying anticipation and forcing viewers to internalize the suspense alongside the characters. The interplay of sound and visual tension elevates these sequences beyond conventional horror, creating an immersive, multisensory experience. The siblings' confrontations with supernatural apparitions during this stage are particularly impactful. The manifestations are designed not merely as visual scares but as reflections of internal fear, guilt, and unresolved trauma. These encounters serve a dual purpose, advancing the plot by revealing clues about the grabber's history and methodology, and deepening character development by forcing Finney and Gwen to confront personal vulnerabilities. Each apparition reinforces the film's central themes of resilience, morality, and the enduring impact of trauma. The climax culminates in a carefully orchestrated encounter with the grabber's residual supernatural presence. Here, the film combines practical effects, visual effects, and intense performances to create a scene that is simultaneously terrifying and narratively satisfying. Finney and Gwen's success in navigating this confrontation relies on their ability to synthesize intuition, courage, and familial trust, underscoring the thematic importance of human connection in overcoming malevolent forces. The Black Phone plays a pivotal narrative and symbolic role in this resolution. Through it, the siblings receive guidance, warnings, and insights that allow them to anticipate supernatural threats and make strategic decisions. Its presence throughout the film, particularly in the climax, emphasizes continuity, the persistence of memory, and the concept that confronting evil requires both courage and knowledge. Following the climactic confrontation, the denouement addresses character arcs and narrative closure. Finney and Gwen, though physically and emotionally scarred, emerge with greater self-awareness, courage, and resilience. Secondary characters who survived or contributed to the resolution are acknowledged, providing a sense of closure to interconnected storylines. The supernatural threat, while diminished, retains an element of ambiguity, preserving the franchise's potential for future exploration. The final scenes also underscore the film's engagement with psychological realism. Even after the immediate threat is neutralized, the lingering impact of trauma, moral dilemmas, and fear is acknowledged, illustrating that survival does not erase psychological consequences. This attention to detail elevates the narrative, offering viewers a more nuanced understanding of heroism and resilience in extreme circumstances. Cinematically, the film employs a variety of techniques to reinforce tension, mood, and thematic depth. Lighting contrasts, shadow play, and framing choices emphasize isolation, fear, and the omnipresence of the grabber's influence. Camera movements vary strategically, from tight close-ups capturing nuanced emotional expressions to wide shots that convey spatial disorientation and vulnerability. The editing rhythm alternates between rapid sequences during moments of action and slower pacing during suspenseful exploration, effectively controlling audience tension and engagement. The musical score complements these techniques, providing both subtle cues during quiet, tension-filled moments and dramatic crescendos during confrontations. Motifs introduced earlier, including the black phone's tone and recurring visual patterns, are employed to unify the film's aesthetic and narrative cohesion. Thematically, Black Phone 2 emphasizes the interplay between fear, courage, moral choice, and resilience. Isolation, both literal in the winter camp and metaphorical through internalized trauma, serves as a crucible for character development. Supernatural elements act as externalized representations of fear and unresolved past trauma, reinforcing the narrative's psychological dimension. The film explores how human connections, particularly familial bonds, provide strength and guidance in confronting extraordinary threats. Secondary characters, minor subplots, and environmental cues all contribute to these thematic explorations, creating a narrative ecosystem in which every element reinforces the central concerns of the story. The conclusion of Black Phone 2 is both emotionally satisfying and intellectually engaging. By resolving the primary plot threads while retaining subtle ambiguity regarding the supernatural, the film achieves a balance between closure and the open-ended potential that sustains audience interest in a continued franchise. Viewers are left with a sense of narrative completion regarding the protagonist's immediate survival while remaining aware that the universe of the Black Phone contains unresolved elements, reflective of ongoing danger, moral complexity, and supernatural mystery. Critical reception highlights the film's success in integrating psychological depth with suspenseful and supernatural horror. Reviewers have praised the layered character development, the careful pacing of suspense, the effective integration of secondary arcs, and the sophisticated use of cinematic techniques to enhance thematic resonance. Commercially, the film's performance, with strong box office numbers, validates both its creative choices and the franchise's continued relevance. Beyond entertainment, Black Phone 2 has stimulated discussion on trauma, morality, resilience, and human responses to extreme fear. The film invites viewers to consider the ethical dimensions of action under duress, the role of intuition and courage in confronting evil, and the psychological consequences of surviving traumatic events. These discussions enrich audience engagement, extending the film's impact beyond conventional horror thrills. In summary, Black Phone 2 achieves a rare balance for a horror sequel, offering both suspenseful entertainment and layered thematic exploration. Through meticulous attention to character development, narrative complexity, cinematic technique, sound design, and thematic integration, the film creates an immersive experience that resonates emotionally and intellectually. By concluding the central arcs while maintaining elements of ambiguity, the film ensures continuity, potential for future installments, and enduring audience engagement. Its combination of supernatural horror, psychological realism, and moral exploration solidifies its place as a significant and sophisticated entry in contemporary horror cinema. As the story progresses, Finney and Gwen gradually uncover the layered and disturbing history of the grabber. Unlike in the first film, where the grabber's presence was primarily physical and immediate, in this sequel his influence is more insidious, manifesting through psychic imprints, dreams, and supernatural disturbances. Gwen's visions become increasingly detailed, showing moments of the grabber's past crimes that were previously unknown. These visions not only heighten the suspense but also provide key narrative clues that allow the siblings to piece together the connections between the victims, the grabber, and their own family. The narrative cleverly blurs the line between reality and hallucination, often leaving both the characters and the audience uncertain about what is truly happening and what exists only in the mind. This creates a sustained tension that is both psychological and supernatural in nature, keeping viewers engaged through uncertainty and fear. Gwen's psychic experiences are depicted with a combination of visual and auditory cues. The black phone rings unexpectedly in her dreams, often accompanied by distorted whispers and ghostly voices, each delivering cryptic messages or warnings. These voices are revealed to be the spirits of the grabber's earlier victims, continuing the motif established in the first film. Unlike Finney's experience, where the voices were largely guides and helpers, Gwen's interactions with these spirits are more fragmented and unsettling, reflecting the increasing complexity of the supernatural system within the black phone universe. The film explores themes of communication across the boundary of life and death, suggesting that unresolved trauma can linger as a spectral echo, influencing the living in subtle yet profound ways. As Finney and Gwen arrive at Alpine Lake, the setting becomes almost a character in itself. The snow-covered landscape, frozen lakes, dense forests, and dilapidated cabins create a sense of isolation that amplifies the character's vulnerability. The film employs a slow-building tension, using environmental sounds such as the creaking of icy branches, the crunch of footsteps on snow, and the whisper of wind through the trees to establish an atmosphere of constant unease. Within this environment, the siblings encounter both human and supernatural threats. While much of the danger originates from the grabber's lingering presence, there are moments where human characters introduce conflict, uncertainty, and moral ambiguity, further complicating the narrative. This interplay between human and supernatural elements adds layers to the story, ensuring that the horror is both tangible and psychological. The film devotes considerable attention to the emotional and psychological development of its characters. Finney's arc is particularly compelling. He struggles with feelings of survivor's guilt and lingering fear. His experiences in the first film have left him hyper-aware of potential threats, and while he attempts to protect Gwen, he also confronts the limitations of his knowledge and abilities. Gwen, on the other hand, embodies resilience, intelligence, and courage, often taking the lead in unraveling the mystery of the visions. Their interactions provide moments of emotional grounding amidst the horror, highlighting familial bonds and the protective instincts that define their relationship. These character-driven elements are interwoven seamlessly with the supernatural narrative, ensuring that the audience remains invested in the outcome beyond simply seeking scares. Supporting characters also play key roles in the development of the story. Damien Beecher's character, a camp supervisor with a mysterious past, is both a source of guidance and tension, as his motives are initially unclear. Other supporting characters, including Miguel Mora, Ariana Rivas, Anna Lore, Graham Abbey, and Maeve Beatty, contribute subplots and interpersonal dynamics that enrich the narrative. Each of these characters provides different perspectives on the central events, helping to expand the universe of Black Phone 2 and demonstrating that the story exists within a broader world, rather than being confined solely to the experiences of Finney and Gwen. These interactions also serve to heighten suspense, as trust and deception become recurring themes, forcing the protagonists to navigate complex social dynamics in addition to supernatural threats. Production elements of Black Phone 2 are notable for their meticulous attention to atmosphere and tone. Cinematography by Per M. Ekberg utilizes stark contrasts between light and shadow, often highlighting the isolation and vulnerability of the characters. The film's visual language emphasizes the cold, harsh environment of the winter setting, using wide shots to convey the emptiness of the landscape and close-ups to capture moments of intimate terror and psychological strain. Sound design plays an equally important role, with ambient noises, distorted voices, and sudden auditory cues heightening tension and reinforcing the supernatural elements of the narrative. These production choices are central to the film's ability to maintain suspense and immerse the audience in a world where the boundary between the living and the dead is increasingly permeable. The mythology of the Black Phone is expanded in the sequel, revealing new rules and limitations of the supernatural device. While in the first film the black phone served primarily as a tool for communication between Finney and the spirits of the grabber's victims, in Black Phone 2 the phone's abilities are more complex. It functions as a conduit for psychic energy, capable of influencing dreams, revealing hidden truths, and allowing for limited intervention in the physical world. These abilities are portrayed with increasing sophistication, demonstrating that the supernatural forces in the Black Phone universe are not static but evolving. The narrative explores the moral implications of interacting with these forces, particularly regarding the responsibility of the living to heed warnings and act upon the information provided by the spirits. Marketing and audience reception played an important role in the film's success. Trailers released prior to the film's premiere emphasized both continuity and novelty, highlighting the return of familiar characters while introducing new supernatural challenges. Visual motifs such as the black phone, snowy landscapes, and spectral figures were central to promotional campaigns, creating anticipation and intrigue. Upon release, the film performed strongly at the box office, earning revenues that exceeded its production budget and demonstrating the enduring appeal of the franchise. Critics praised the film for its ability to balance supernatural horror with emotional depth, while audiences responded positively to the expanded mythology, suspenseful set pieces, and strong performances by the cast. The narrative resolution of Black Phone 2 integrates both supernatural and emotional closure. Through a combination of courage, intelligence, and collaboration, Finney and Gwen confront the lingering threat of the grabber, uncovering hidden truths about the nature of the black phone and the spiritual resonance of past trauma. While some questions are intentionally left open to maintain an element of mystery and allow for potential future sequels, the film provides a satisfying arc for its central characters, demonstrating growth, resilience, and the enduring strength of familial bonds. The interplay of psychological and supernatural horror ensures that the film's climax is both emotionally impactful and terrifying, leaving a lasting impression on audiences. Minor characters in Black Phone 2 play crucial roles in enriching both the plot and the emotional texture of the story. Characters like Kenneth and Barbara, though not central to the sibling dynamic, serve as mirrors and foils to Finney and Gwen, highlighting how ordinary humans respond to extraordinary threats. Kenneth embodies caution mixed with skepticism, often questioning the reality of Gwen's visions or the presence of supernatural forces. His hesitation reflects a broader human instinct to deny or rationalize phenomena beyond comprehension, underscoring a thematic contrast between those who accept the unknown and those who resist it. Barbara, in contrast, demonstrates empathy and adaptability, responding to crises with both practical action and emotional intelligence. Her interactions with the main characters illustrate how fear can motivate collaboration and courage, and how communal bonds can provide critical support in times of danger. By including these nuanced secondary characters, the filmmakers expand the narrative beyond the protagonists, creating a multi-layered world in which the supernatural threat affects a spectrum of human personalities and moral choices. Scene construction in Black Phone 2 exemplifies a meticulous attention to tension, pacing, and atmosphere. The early winter sequences establish both setting and mood, emphasizing isolation, cold, and the psychological vulnerability of the characters. As Finney and Gwen navigate the snow-covered terrain, the cinematography uses wide, desolate shots to reinforce their exposure and smallness in the face of looming threats. Intermittent close-ups capture micro-expressions, fear, determination, hesitation, that communicate the internal stakes as much as the external dangers. Environmental sounds, such as the crunch of snow, whistling wind, or distant snapping branches, are layered with subtle supernatural cues to sustain suspense without overwhelming the narrative. These scenes exemplify the film's commitment to immersive horror, combining visual, auditory, and emotional tension to create a holistic experience of fear. The climax demonstrates the integration of multiple narrative and cinematic elements. As the siblings confront the grabber's spectral presence, suspense arises from several converging sources: the unpredictable supernatural behavior of the antagonist, the isolation and environmental hazards of the winter camp, and the emotional stakes of sibling protection. The scene uses a combination of dim lighting, shadow play, and strategic camera angles to obscure the antagonist while emphasizing the protagonist's vulnerability. Sudden bursts of sound, metallic clangs, distorted voices, and the ominous ringing of the black phone, heighten tension and provide narrative cues. Symbolically, the confrontation represents not only a battle against external evil but also the internal struggle to reconcile trauma, assert agency, and protect loved ones. The climax underscores the film's recurring theme that courage is cultivated through engagement with fear and adversity, rather than avoidance. Psychologically, the film is rich in exploring trauma, resilience, and moral responsibility. Finney's character illustrates the lingering effects of extreme fear and victimization, highlighting how survival leaves indelible marks on perception, behavior, and emotional regulation. His hypervigilance, occasional withdrawal, and moral sensitivity reflect realistic post-traumatic responses, making him a deeply relatable protagonist. Gwen, by contrast, demonstrates a different kind of psychic burden, the ability to perceive and emotionally internalize horrors experienced by others. Her sensitivity serves as both a narrative device and a thematic exploration of empathy, suggesting that awareness of suffering entails both responsibility and psychological cost. Together, the siblings' experiences convey the idea that confronting evil, whether human, supernatural, or psychological, requires courage, awareness, and moral engagement. The film's exploration of morality and ethical decision-making is particularly compelling. Characters are frequently confronted with dilemmas that force them to weigh self-preservation against the well-being of others. Gwen's visions compel intervention, while Finney's strategic thinking requires assessing risk and potential consequences. These narrative choices highlight the intersection of fear, ethics, and agency, suggesting that horror is most effective when it challenges characters to act in the face of uncertainty and moral ambiguity. The presence of secondary characters further complicates these ethical landscapes, providing opportunities for collaboration, betrayal, or hesitation, and illustrating the human capacity for both courage and failure in extreme circumstances. Thematically, Black Phone 2 continues to explore the relationship between memory, trauma, and supernatural forces. The Black Phone serves as a metaphorical conduit, bridging past horrors with present challenges. Each ringing forces characters to confront unresolved events, reinforcing the film's meditation on the persistence of trauma and the necessity of engagement with the past. The winter environment, with its harshness and isolation, reinforces emotional stasis and the chilling consequences of avoidance. Through environmental, psychological, and supernatural elements, the film communicates the idea that fear, memory, and responsibility are intertwined, and that facing trauma is both a personal and relational endeavor. From a production perspective, the filmmaker's attention to detail is evident in every frame. Lighting choices distinguish between moments of perceived safety and imminent danger, often using chiaroscuro techniques to heighten tension. Costume and makeup designs subtly reinforce character traits and emotional states, while set design integrates narrative clues and symbolic elements, such as the Black Phone's recurring visual motif or environmental indicators of hidden dangers. Cinematographic choices, including the interplay between wide establishing shots and intimate close-ups, enhance both suspense and character engagement. Sound design, including layered environmental cues, distorted voices, and dynamic scoring, operates in concert with visual design to create a multisensory experience that maintains tension across narrative arcs. Marketing strategies for Black Phone 2 emphasized both continuity with the first film and expansion into new narrative territory. Trailers and teasers highlighted the winter camp environment, the continued threat of the grabber, and the psychic abilities of Gwen, generating anticipation among fans while attracting new audiences interested in psychological and supernatural horror. Interactive social media campaigns encouraged speculation about plot developments, character motivations, and unresolved mysteries from the original film. Behind-the-scenes features emphasized the dedication of the cast and crew, the meticulous production design, and the thematic depth of the sequel, reinforcing the film's credibility and appeal. This multi-pronged approach contributed to strong initial box office performance and sustained audience engagement. Audience reception reinforced the effectiveness of these strategies. Fans praised the continuation of character arcs, the emotional depth of sibling relationships, and the innovative use of environmental and psychological horror. Critics highlighted the integration of suspense, thematic resonance, and visual storytelling, noting that the sequel successfully expanded the franchise while retaining its core emotional and horror-driven appeal. Some critiques focused on narrative complexity and pacing, acknowledging that the film's ambition occasionally diverted attention from the intimate tension of the original. Overall, the reception emphasized the film's success in balancing terror, emotional resonance, and thematic depth, cementing its status as a standout entry in contemporary horror cinema. One of the most striking aspects of Black Phone 2 is its meticulous attention to individual scenes, each crafted to maximize suspense, advance the narrative, and deepen character development. From the very beginning, the opening sequence sets the tone, showing Finney's cautious attempt to navigate everyday life post-trauma. The filmmakers use tight framing and low lighting to convey his lingering anxiety and hyper-awareness, emphasizing the psychological residue of his previous encounter with the grabber. Subtle visual cues, such as lingering shadows, off-screen noises, and the sudden appearance of objects in unusual places, immediately create unease, signaling that the supernatural threat remains active even in ostensibly safe environments. This careful orchestration ensures that viewers are drawn into Finney's perspective, experiencing tension as he does, which fosters empathy and heightens engagement with the story. Gwen's introduction is equally significant, as the film shifts focus to her experiences with the Black Phone. Early sequences establish her curiosity, intelligence, and latent bravery, while also highlighting her vulnerability. Through long shots that isolate her within snow-covered landscapes or dimly lit cabins, the cinematography emphasizes both her smallness in a threatening world and the enormity of the supernatural forces she faces. The filmmakers employ point-of-view shots during the Black Phone calls, making the audience experience the disorienting, otherworldly nature of the messages directly. These visual choices reinforce the narrative's psychological dimension, blending fear with a sense of active participation in deciphering the mystery. Key sequences at Alpine Lake demonstrate the sequel's skillful use of pacing and tension. One particularly memorable scene involves the siblings navigating a frozen lake while being subtly guided, or misled, by the disembodied voice from the Black Phone. Cinematography captures the glistening ice, the endless snow, and distant tree lines that obscure potential threats, creating a sense of isolation and precariousness. Slow tracking shots accentuate the tension of each step, while sudden cuts to shadows or spectral figures trigger immediate fear responses. The interplay between wide environmental shots and intimate close-ups allows the audience to oscillate between awareness of the broader danger and intimate emotional engagement with the character's fear, a technique that underscores Derrickson's mastery of suspenseful visual storytelling. Character arcs are further developed through nuanced performances and carefully structured sequences. Finney evolves from a cautious survivor into a decisive and strategic figure, navigating both physical and supernatural threats with growing confidence. His internal struggle, balancing fear, protective instincts, and moral responsibility, is depicted through both dialogue and subtle visual storytelling, such as lingering gazes, hesitant movements, and moments of quiet reflection. Gwen's arc mirrors this evolution, emphasizing growth in courage, agency, and critical thinking. The film carefully charts her transformation from reactive to proactive, highlighting the influence of familial bonds, moral clarity, and intuition. Their dynamic partnership is central to the narrative, with each scene reinforcing their interdependence, mutual trust, and the emotional resonance of sibling solidarity in the face of evil. Cinematography continues to play a crucial role in enhancing horror and tension. The use of shadows, selective focus, and dynamic camera angles creates a sense of disorientation and unpredictability, ensuring that the audience is constantly on edge. Scenes featuring the grabber, whether through spectral manifestations, masked presence, or psychological influence, are often framed with oblique angles, tight cropping, or sudden shifts in perspective, evoking discomfort and suspense. Practical effects, combined with subtle digital enhancements, maintain believability while amplifying the supernatural aura. Lighting contrasts, between dim interior cabins, snow-reflective exteriors, and sudden illumination from the Black Phone, provide both narrative cues and visual impact, guiding the viewer's attention and heightening emotional responses. Audience reception of these scenes and performances reflects the effectiveness of the film's narrative strategies. Early screenings and fan reactions highlight particular sequences, such as the frozen lake scene, spectral manifestations, and climactic confrontation at the camp's hidden sector, as standout moments of tension and horror. Critics have praised the balance of suspense, character development, and thematic depth, noting that the film maintains the frightening atmosphere of the original while expanding its scope in meaningful ways. Discussions on social media platforms frequently cite the performances of Mason Thames and Madeline McGraw as especially compelling, highlighting their chemistry and the emotional authenticity they bring to the sibling dynamic. Ethan Hawke's portrayal of the grabber continues to evoke strong reactions, with viewers commenting on the haunting persistence of his character, blending corporeal menace with supernatural terror. The film's pacing and scene composition contribute significantly to its success. By alternating high-intensity sequences with quieter, reflective moments, the narrative ensures that suspense is sustained without overwhelming the audience. Scenes of direct confrontation with supernatural elements are interspersed with sequences focused on strategy, dialogue, and character reflection, creating a rhythm that balances fear with cognitive engagement. This interplay allows viewers to process both the immediate horror and the underlying thematic messages, such as the enduring impact of trauma, the importance of family bonds, and the struggle between agency and external influence. Every scene, whether focused on visual scares or emotional introspection, serves the dual purpose of advancing plot and reinforcing thematic resonance. Black Phone 2 also demonstrates sophistication in integrating practical effects, digital enhancements, and sound design into individual scenes. The ringing of the black phone, for instance, is not merely an auditory cue but a narrative device that signifies danger, revelation, or guidance. Its tone, timing, and recurrence are carefully calibrated to manipulate tension and maintain suspense across multiple sequences. Environmental sounds, wind through the trees, cracking ice, distant footsteps, are layered to create an immersive soundscape that enhances both realism and psychological unease. Musical scoring is similarly nuanced, emphasizing thematic undertones during reflective moments and accentuating terror during climactic encounters. The combination of these cinematic techniques ensures that each scene operates on multiple levels, providing both sensory engagement and narrative significance. After the climactic confrontation, the narrative focuses on the aftermath of the events at Alpine Lake. The three rescued boys are reunited with their families, providing emotional relief and closure to the immediate crisis. Their interactions with Gwen, Finney, and Ernesto highlight the themes of empathy, courage, and shared resilience. The boys' fear and confusion are met with patient guidance and support, emphasizing that trauma requires care and understanding to overcome. The film illustrates that while physical danger may have passed, the psychological impact of fear and terror lingers and must be addressed through human connection and emotional processing. Finney and Gwen return home, both changed by the experiences at the camp. Finney exhibits increased confidence and composure, demonstrating that confronting past trauma, even indirectly through supernatural means, can foster growth and resilience. Gwen, whose psychic connection to the grabber's residual presence has deepened, begins to accept her abilities as part of her identity. Her experiences demonstrate the film's recurring motif that understanding and harnessing one's inner strength is crucial to overcoming external threats. Ernesto's presence throughout the story cements the value of friendship, loyalty, and trust, illustrating how collaboration and mutual support are essential in confronting overwhelming danger. The final scenes include subtle, eerie hints that supernatural forces continue to exist beyond the immediate threat of the grabber. Shadows flicker in the corners of rooms, distant whispers echo faintly through empty spaces, and the black phone briefly rings one last time before falling silent. These elements reinforce the idea that evil, trauma, and supernatural forces are not easily contained and that vigilance, courage, and emotional awareness remain necessary. The ending balances closure with lingering tension, leaving audiences with both satisfaction in the resolution of the main plot and anticipation for possible future developments in the franchise. Thematically, Black Phone 2 explores multiple layers of human experience. The film examines the long-term effects of trauma, showing how survivors of extreme violence continue to navigate psychological scars even after physical threats have been eliminated. It highlights the importance of communication, both literal and metaphorical, as represented by the black phone that allows connections across time, space, and the boundaries between life and death. Family, friendship, and empathy emerge as central motifs, emphasizing that confronting evil is not solely a matter of personal courage but requires communal effort and understanding. The supernatural elements function as both a narrative device and a metaphor for internal struggles, demonstrating how past violence and fear can persist if left unacknowledged. From a production standpoint, Black Phone 2 demonstrates careful attention to continuity with the first film while expanding its visual and thematic horizons. Cinematography by Per M. Ekberg employs contrasts between the harsh, snow-covered exteriors of Alpine Lake and the intimate, shadowed interiors to mirror the psychological tension experienced by the characters. Editing by Louise Ford creates a rhythm that alternates between suspenseful, action-driven sequences and reflective, emotional moments, allowing the audience to engage both viscerally and emotionally. The musical score, composed by Atticus Derrickson, reinforces these shifts, using ambient tones to accentuate suspense and melodic themes to underscore character growth and emotional resolution. Production design emphasized the liminal, haunted nature of the camp, ensuring that spaces could serve both practical and supernatural narrative functions. The marketing and promotional strategy for the film included trailers that showcased the snowy, isolated setting, supernatural manifestations, and Ethan Hawke's return as the Grabber. Merchandise, including a Black Phone-themed popcorn bucket, reinforced the film's identity and created unique audience engagement. The timing of the release, with a premiere at Fantastic Fest on September 20, 2025, and a wide release on October 17, 2025, leveraged the Halloween season, enhancing both box office performance and audience reception. The film was later released digitally on November 4, 2025, with anticipated streaming availability on Universal's Peacock and other platforms. Critics and audiences generally responded positively to Black Phone 2. Reviews often cited the film's atmospheric tension, expanded mythology, and strong performances, particularly those of Ethan Hawke as the Grabber and Madeline McGraw as Gwen. Some critiques noted the sequel's heavier reliance on supernatural elements compared to the more grounded suspense of the first film, though many appreciated the thematic depth and exploration of trauma, family bonds, and psychological resilience. Box office performance was robust, with the film ranking near the top of domestic charts during its opening and performing strongly through the Halloween period, demonstrating continued audience interest in horror sequels that balance scares with emotional resonance. Black Phone 2 contributes to the broader conversation about horror storytelling in contemporary cinema. It demonstrates how sequels can expand a franchise's thematic scope beyond simple repetition of scares, integrating psychological, emotional, and supernatural elements into a cohesive narrative. The film explores how trauma, fear, and unresolved evil persist across time and generations, highlighting the importance of understanding and confronting these forces. Its blend of suspense, horror, and emotional complexity positions it as both a continuation of a popular franchise and a study of the ways in which horror can illuminate human experience. The sequel also establishes potential narrative pathways for future installments. Director Scott Derrickson has indicated that any continuation would focus on further exploring the mythology of the Black Phone and the lingering consequences of the Grabber's malevolence, provided that the story can exceed the quality and thematic depth of the first two films. This approach reflects a commitment to narrative integrity, suggesting that future projects in the series would continue to blend supernatural horror with emotional and psychological resonance. In conclusion, Black Phone 2 serves as a multi-layered horror narrative that blends supernatural elements with psychological drama, expanding the world introduced in the first film while exploring the emotional lives of its characters. The story emphasizes the persistence of trauma, the importance of communication and empathy, and the power of courage and collaboration in confronting malevolent forces. Its narrative structure, cinematography, score, and editing work in concert to create a suspenseful and emotionally engaging experience that resonates beyond the immediate horror of the story. By integrating supernatural tension with psychological depth, Black Phone 2 establishes itself as a notable entry in contemporary horror cinema, offering both thrills and an exploration of human resilience and the enduring effects of fear and violence. The film's resolution balances closure with the acknowledgement that the world remains haunted by unresolved forces. Characters achieve personal growth and emotional understanding while simultaneously recognizing that vigilance, empathy, and courage are ongoing necessities. Black Phone 2's synthesis of horror, family drama, and supernatural storytelling demonstrates that sequels can succeed both commercially and artistically when they respect the source material while expanding its emotional and thematic horizons. It provides audiences with a compelling, immersive narrative that entertains, challenges, and resonates on multiple levels, reaffirming the franchise's relevance in the modern horror landscape and establishing a foundation for potential future installments. The tension in Black Phone 2 continues to build as Finney and Gwen explore Alpine Lake, confronting both physical and psychological challenges. The environment itself is a reflection of the characters' inner turmoil. Snow drifts and icy lakes are not just scenery but symbolic representations of isolation and the chilling persistence of past trauma. The cabins where the siblings seek refuge are dilapidated and abandoned, each creaking floorboard and rattling window amplifying the sense of danger. The cinematography makes extensive use of shadows, reflective surfaces, and obscured viewpoints, giving the audience glimpses of potential threats before fully revealing them. This deliberate pacing maintains suspense and keeps viewers uncertain of what is real and what is imagined, a technique that reinforces the film's central themes of fear, memory, and supernatural interference. The narrative often shifts seamlessly between moments of quiet, almost meditative reflection and bursts of sudden, jarring horror, ensuring that the audience remains on edge throughout the runtime. Character development is central to the storytelling. Finney's journey is portrayed with a focus on resilience tempered by the lingering effects of childhood trauma. He is cautious, hyper-aware of his surroundings, and at times reluctant to fully confront supernatural elements, reflecting the psychological scars left by his prior encounter with the Grabber. Yet, beneath his hesitancy is a growing courage and determination, driven by a desire to protect Gwen and prevent history from repeating itself. Gwen, by contrast, exhibits both bravery and vulnerability. Her psychic visions are terrifying and disorienting, yet she demonstrates remarkable analytical skills and intuition, piecing together clues that others might overlook. Her character embodies the intersection of courage and curiosity, acting as the narrative's primary driver while also humanizing the supernatural phenomena through her emotional responses and personal stakes. The film also emphasizes the moral and ethical implications of interacting with supernatural forces. The Black Phone, which served as a communication device between Finney and the spirits in the first film, is portrayed in the sequel as a more complex and powerful conduit. Its ringing, often unexpected and accompanied by distorted voices, provides both guidance and warning. These spirits, who are the remnants of past victims, present cryptic information that forces the siblings to make difficult choices. The narrative highlights that these supernatural interactions are not neutral, engaging with them carries risks and responsibilities. Misinterpreting or ignoring the messages can have dire consequences, adding a layer of psychological tension that extends beyond conventional horror thrills. Supporting characters contribute to both plot progression and thematic depth. Damien Beecher's camp supervisor is initially enigmatic, raising questions about his motives and past connections to the site of the supernatural events. His interactions with Finney and Gwen offer moments of tension and mistrust, as the audience is led to question whether he is an ally or an additional threat. Other secondary characters, including Miguel Mora, Ariana Rivas, Anna Lore, Graham Abbey, and Maeve Beatty, help populate the world of Alpine Lake, creating a social environment that contrasts with the isolation of the snowbound wilderness. Their presence allows the story to explore human dynamics such as loyalty, suspicion, and courage in the face of fear, complementing the supernatural threats with grounded, realistic interactions. The mythology of the Black Phone is expanded in detail throughout the film. In addition to facilitating communication with the dead, the device is shown to exert influence over dreams and memories, allowing characters to access information that would otherwise be hidden. The film portrays this power as both a blessing and a burden, requiring the living to interpret fragmented visions and cryptic messages while facing the psychological strain of engaging with forces beyond human understanding. The sequel further explores the origin of the phone and the rules governing its supernatural properties, suggesting that the device is linked to unresolved trauma and lingering malevolence that transcends time. This expansion of the lore enriches the narrative, providing depth for viewers who are invested in the series and creating opportunities for future sequels or spin-offs. The winter storm at Alpine Lake functions as both a literal and symbolic obstacle. The severe weather isolates the characters, heightening vulnerability and emphasizing the harsh conditions in which they must operate. The storm also serves as a metaphor for the emotional turbulence experienced by Finney and Gwen. Scenes involving snowstorms, icy treks, and blinding winds are filmed with meticulous attention to detail, ensuring that the environment itself acts as a source of tension. These sequences blend practical effects with careful cinematography to create a visceral experience that engages the audience's senses and heightens the stakes for the character's survival. Throughout the narrative, suspense is maintained through careful pacing, alternating between quiet, suspenseful moments and sudden, shocking reveals. The film employs jump scares sparingly, focusing instead on sustained psychological tension and the uncanny. The use of sound design is particularly effective. Distorted whispers, ringing phones, creaking floors, and environmental sounds are layered to create a sense of pervasive unease. The audience is often made to feel as vulnerable as the characters, experiencing the same uncertainty and anticipation as Finney and Gwen as they navigate the treacherous environment and confront the lingering threat of the grabber. The climax of Black Phone 2 is both terrifying and emotionally charged. Through careful observation, collaboration, and courage, Finney and Gwen confront the supernatural manifestations of the grabber. They must reconcile the past with the present, making sense of visions, cryptic messages, and residual malevolent forces. The resolution provides closure on several narrative threads, including the siblings' personal growth and the immediate threat posed by the grabber, while leaving enough ambiguity to suggest that the supernatural world continues to operate beyond their understanding. This blend of resolution and uncertainty keeps the story engaging and open to future expansions of the franchise. As the final sequences of Black Phone 2 continue to unfold, the narrative delves even more deeply into detailed scenes that heighten suspense and illuminate character psychology. One of the most memorable sequences occurs when Finney and Gwen, guided by the Black Phone's mysterious calls, explore the old, snow-covered main lodge of Alpine Lake. The lodge, long abandoned and echoing with the weight of past horrors, becomes a locus of both narrative tension and thematic symbolism. Every creaking floorboard, broken window, and shadow cast by the flickering lanterns emphasizes isolation, vulnerability, and the lingering presence of past victims. In this scene, Gwen experiences a vision in which the victims of the grabber silently communicate warnings and guidance through the Black Phone. The filmmakers use visual layering, ghostly apparitions appearing behind real objects, subtle distortions in reflective surfaces, and faint light trails, to convey the supernatural while maintaining suspense. This visual technique underscores the theme that the past continually informs the present and that unresolved trauma can manifest in tangible ways. Dialogue during these sequences is sparse but potent. Gwen whispers fragments of warnings received through the Black Phone, often repeating cryptic phrases that compel Finney to interpret their meaning quickly. These interactions highlight both Gwen's agency and the collaborative problem-solving dynamic between the siblings, demonstrating that survival requires intuition, trust, and courage. Meanwhile, the camera frequently alternates between tight close-ups of the siblings' faces and wide-angle shots of the lodge's shadowy interiors. These choices emphasize both the human experience of fear and the oppressive vastness of the environment in which they are trapped. In one particularly tense moment, a secondary character, a young camper previously introduced in minor arcs, is cornered by a spectral projection of the grabber. The scene is choreographed to maximize tension without relying solely on shock. Rapid cuts interspersed with sustained shots of the characters' panic create a rhythm that mirrors their psychological state, while practical effects, such as subtle movement of objects and faint whispers, amplify the horror. This minor subplot ultimately intersects with the main narrative, as the sibling duo arrives in time to provide assistance, reinforcing the film's theme that cooperation and human connection are vital when confronting evil. As the narrative builds toward the ultimate confrontation with the grabber's residual presence, the film explores layered thematic concerns. One recurring motif is the concept of moral courage under duress. Throughout the story, characters are faced with decisions that test not only physical bravery but also ethical judgment. The campers, counselors, and siblings each encounter situations in which they must weigh self-preservation against the imperative to protect others. These choices are dramatized through sequences of suspense, often in dimly lit corridors or isolated forested areas, emphasizing the psychological weight of ethical decision-making in crisis. The climactic confrontation is meticulously staged. Finney and Gwen, using insights from the black phone and guidance from spectral apparitions, confront the grabber in the lodge's basement, a space symbolically representing the buried past and the unresolved trauma that has haunted them. The filmmakers employ a combination of practical effects, masked figures, mechanical traps, and environmental hazards, and subtle CGI enhancements to create a scene that feels grounded yet undeniably supernatural. The sequence is interspersed with cross-cutting to secondary characters who, through parallel arcs, demonstrate bravery, sacrifice, and ingenuity. Their actions contribute directly to the resolution, reinforcing the narrative's emphasis on interconnectedness and the significance of collective action in overcoming evil. During this sequence, dialogue is minimal but purposeful. Finney commands Gwen and other allies with concise instructions, emphasizing trust, quick thinking, and collaboration. Gwen's responses, often reflecting intuition and moral clarity, illustrate the siblings' growth since the events of the first film. These interactions are punctuated by moments of silence and sudden supernatural disruptions, heightening tension while maintaining emotional authenticity. The culmination of the confrontation is both terrifying and cathartic. The grabber's residual supernatural influence is neutralized through a combination of human ingenuity, courage, and moral resolve. Visual and auditory effects are used to signify the collapse of his power. The black phone's eerie hum fades, apparitions dissipate, and environmental disturbances settle. This resolution is deeply satisfying from a narrative perspective, providing closure for both primary and secondary characters while preserving subtle ambiguity regarding the broader supernatural universe. Following the climax, the denouement addresses the psychological aftermath. Finney and Gwen are shown processing the events they survived, their dialogue and body language reflecting relief, introspection, and the enduring bond between siblings. Secondary characters who survived the ordeal contribute to a sense of communal recovery, highlighting the film's thematic focus on resilience, solidarity, and the human capacity to confront and endure trauma. Cinematically, these final scenes employ softer lighting, longer takes, and contemplative framing to contrast with the high-intensity sequences of the climax. The shift in visual tone mirrors the narrative resolution, emphasizing healing, reflection, and the continuation of life beyond the immediate horrors. The black phone, now silent, serves as a symbolic reminder of the past, its lingering presence reinforcing the narrative's exploration of memory, trauma, and resilience. The final thematic resonance of Black Phone 2 is multifaceted. By juxtaposing supernatural horror with psychological realism, the film explores how individuals respond to extreme fear, moral dilemmas, and isolation. Themes of family, trust, courage, and ethical choice are intricately interwoven with suspenseful storytelling, ensuring that viewers remain intellectually and emotionally engaged. Furthermore, the careful integration of secondary characters and minor subplots reinforces the narrative's depth, providing texture and complexity that rewards attentive viewers. Beyond narrative and thematic achievements, Black Phone 2 demonstrates mastery in cinematic technique. The interplay of lighting, sound design, camera work, and editing contributes to a fully immersive experience. From the faint creaks of snow-laden floors to the eerie hum of the black phone, from the shadowed corridors to the flickering apparitions, every element is orchestrated to heighten suspense while reinforcing the story's psychological and emotional dimensions. The critical reception reflects recognition of these achievements, with reviewers praising the film's ability to balance terror with substantive narrative and emotional depth. Audiences have similarly responded positively, appreciating both the continuation of the franchise and the expansion of its universe through nuanced storytelling, multidimensional characters, and inventive horror techniques. Commercially, the film's success underscores the viability of the franchise, opening opportunities for future sequels or spin-offs that continue to explore the mythology, character arcs, and thematic concerns established in the first two films. In essence, Black Phone 2 exemplifies how a horror sequel can transcend conventional genre limitations. By integrating suspense, supernatural elements, detailed character development, minor arcs, thematic resonance, and sophisticated cinematic techniques, the film creates an immersive, emotionally compelling, and intellectually engaging experience. Its attention to psychological realism, moral exploration, and visual storytelling ensures that it is not merely a continuation of the original film but an expansion of the universe that adds depth, sophistication, and lasting impact to the narrative. The climax and resolution of Black Phone 2 are carefully constructed to maximize both tension and thematic resonance, blending environmental, supernatural, and psychological horror into a cohesive narrative apex. The sequence begins with Finney and Gwen confronting the grabber's spectral presence deep within the snowbound camp, a setting that amplifies their vulnerability. The filmmakers employ wide establishing shots to convey the isolation of the characters, making the surrounding landscape feel vast, cold, and threatening. Close-ups, meanwhile, capture the siblings' micro-expressions, fear, determination, and uncertainty, allowing the audience to empathize deeply with their struggle. This combination of framing techniques reinforces the dual narrative of external danger and internal psychological tension, creating a sense of immediacy and immersion. The scene's suspense relies on layering multiple threats simultaneously. The grabber's unpredictable supernatural actions create a constant sense of peril, while environmental hazards, slippery ice, treacherous snow drifts, and hidden obstacles, force the characters to navigate physical danger alongside psychic terror. Simultaneously, the narrative tension is heightened by the ethical and emotional stakes. Finney must protect Gwen, while Gwen must confront visions that threaten to overwhelm her. The convergence of these elements produces a suspenseful, multidimensional climax in which fear, courage, and morality intersect, emphasizing the film's thematic focus on resilience and relational bonds in the face of trauma. The supernatural horror is enhanced by carefully designed visual and auditory cues. Lighting is used to manipulate perception, with shadowy figures and flickering illumination creating uncertainty about the antagonist's location and intentions. The Black Phone emits an otherworldly tone, both alarming and symbolic, signaling the convergence of past and present horrors. Sound design integrates distorted voices, environmental effects, and a dynamic score that responds to character actions and emotional beats. These auditory cues are meticulously synchronized with visual framing to heighten suspense, demonstrating the filmmaker's mastery of horror mechanics. The interplay of sight, sound, and psychological tension ensures that the climax is both viscerally frightening and narratively meaningful. Symbolism in the climax and resolution is particularly potent. The Black Phone continues to serve as a metaphor for unresolved trauma, memory, and moral responsibility. Each ring functions as a narrative device, forcing characters to engage with past events and confront ethical decisions. The winter environment, including ice, snow, and shadowed forests, symbolizes emotional stasis, isolation, and the chilling persistence of fear. The siblings' navigation of this environment reflects their psychological journey, confronting fear, asserting agency, and reconciling with the past. The resolution, while providing closure to the immediate supernatural threat, maintains a lingering sense of unease, emphasizing that trauma, memory, and moral responsibility cannot be entirely eradicated but must be continuously negotiated. From a philosophical perspective, Black Phone 2 explores the interplay of fear, morality, and human agency. The narrative suggests that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Ethical dilemmas pervade the story, compelling characters to balance self-preservation with the protection of others, and to confront past injustices or unresolved trauma. The supernatural elements function as both literal and metaphorical agents of accountability, compelling characters to face consequences and make morally significant choices. This layering of horror and philosophy elevates the film, providing depth beyond conventional scares and positioning it as a work that interrogates the human condition through the lens of fear and survival. Comparisons with other contemporary horror films and literature highlight the distinctiveness of Black Phone 2. While the franchise shares motifs with classic slasher and supernatural horror films, isolated settings, malevolent antagonists, suspenseful pacing, it distinguishes itself through character-driven storytelling, psychological depth, and thematic sophistication. In contrast to films that prioritize shock value or gore, Black Phone 2 emphasizes emotional resonance and moral complexity, echoing elements found in horror literature by authors such as Stephen King and Shirley Jackson. The film's integration of psychic phenomena, ethical stakes, and trauma exploration situates it within a lineage of psychologically informed horror, demonstrating how contemporary cinema can evolve traditional genre conventions while retaining suspenseful, frightening storytelling. Minor sequences throughout the film reinforce these thematic and psychological concerns. For example, moments in which Gwen experiences partial visions of past events underscore the complexity of human perception and the weight of inherited trauma. Similarly, Finney's strategic interactions with secondary characters reveal his growing understanding of leadership, morality, and the necessity of careful decision-making under duress. Environmental obstacles, such as navigating treacherous ice or disorienting snowstorms, function as both literal threats and symbolic representations of internal challenges. By layering these elements, the filmmakers create a narrative in which horror is not confined to external scares but permeates character psychology, moral choice, and thematic inquiry. The final resolution offers both narrative closure and thematic reflection. While the immediate threat of the grabber is neutralized, the film leaves lingering questions about the persistence of trauma and the unseen consequences of past events. Gwen's psychic sensitivity remains a tool for insight and empathy, suggesting that awareness of the past carries both responsibility and potential peril. Finney's journey emphasizes the ongoing nature of recovery and resilience, portraying survival as an active, morally engaged process rather than a simple escape from danger. This resolution reinforces the franchise's commitment to combining horror with psychological and ethical complexity, leaving the audience with both satisfaction and contemplation. Black Phone 2 also explores the mechanics of suspense in a manner that reflects advanced horror filmmaking techniques. The narrative structure strategically alternates between periods of calm, slow-building tension, and sudden, climactic shocks. Visual misdirection, auditory cues, and character-focused framing are used to manipulate perception, maintaining uncertainty and fear throughout. By pacing these sequences to allow moments of reflection and emotional engagement, the film ensures that horror is experienced on multiple levels: visceral, psychological, and ethical. This layered approach exemplifies the franchise's sophisticated understanding of suspense, distinguishing it from more formulaic horror entries. The film's thematic richness extends to reflections on family, memory, and intergenerational trauma. Sibling dynamics form the emotional core of the narrative, with Finney and Gwen representing both the protective bonds and the burdens of shared experience. Their interactions highlight how trauma can be both isolating and connective, fostering resilience through relational support while also amplifying emotional stakes. Supernatural elements function as a narrative mechanism to explore these themes, illustrating how unresolved past events exert influence across time, shaping perception, behavior, and ethical responsibility. Black Phone 2 employs a wealth of symbolic imagery that enriches both its narrative and psychological impact. The black phone itself is the central symbol, functioning on multiple layers beyond its literal presence as a supernatural device. It represents the inescapability of trauma, the lingering voices of those lost, and the moral responsibility of the living to act in response to warnings. Each call from the phone carries an emotional weight that underscores the protagonist's inner conflicts. The filmmakers use visual cues, such as subtle lighting shifts, shadow elongation, and reflections on the phone's surface, to emphasize its spectral and symbolic qualities. In many sequences, the phone's presence alters the perception of the surrounding environment, transforming ordinary rooms, cabins, or forest paths into uncanny spaces charged with danger, suspense, and the metaphysical significance of memory and unresolved trauma. Winter and snow serve as recurring motifs throughout the film, operating symbolically as both protective and threatening forces. On one hand, snow isolates the protagonists, shielding them from external interference and heightening the tension of their encounters with supernatural phenomena. On the other hand, the cold, white expanse becomes a metaphor for emotional and psychological isolation, emphasizing the character's struggle against fear, uncertainty, and unresolved grief. Cinematographers utilize the reflective quality of snow and ice to create eerie lighting effects, such as distorted shadows and unnatural reflections, which reinforce the supernatural presence and underscore the film's thematic exploration of perception versus reality. These visual motifs operate in concert with sound design, amplifying tension and creating immersive sequences that resonate emotionally and psychologically with the audience. Secondary characters contribute significantly to the narrative's complexity, illustrating the broader societal and relational dimensions of confronting evil. Camp supervisors, local townspeople, and other youths serve as foils, allies, and occasionally unwitting obstacles to Finney and Gwen. For example, a well-intentioned camp supervisor initially misinterprets the siblings' warnings and inadvertently exacerbates the danger, while other minor characters provide critical information that allows the protagonists to anticipate or circumvent supernatural threats. These arcs are not merely functional but offer thematic depth, exploring concepts of responsibility, trust, and human fallibility. Interactions with these characters underscore the narrative principle that surviving and confronting evil is both an individual and collective endeavor, reliant on discernment, courage, and cooperation. Psychological motifs are intricately layered into the film, blending elements of memory, perception, and moral choice. The black phone functions as a conduit not only to the supernatural but to the character's subconscious, manifesting fears, doubts, and unresolved conflicts in visual and auditory forms. Scenes in which Gwen confronts apparitions of past victims, or Finney relives moments of vulnerability, illustrate the interplay between internal psychological struggles and external threats. These motifs extend the horror beyond physical danger, creating tension through cognitive and emotional engagement. The narrative suggests that understanding and confronting one's own fear, past experiences, and ethical choices is essential for survival, reinforcing the film's exploration of trauma and moral courage. Intertextual references also enrich the film's depth. The sequel incorporates subtle nods to classic horror tropes, such as the masked antagonist, isolated settings, and the juxtaposition of innocence with malevolent presence. These references honor genre conventions while innovating within them, blending familiar narrative structures with unique supernatural mechanisms and psychological complexity. The narrative pays homage to earlier horror works by exploring themes of predation, isolation, and moral choice, while avoiding mere replication, ensuring that the story stands as both a continuation of the original Black Phone and a distinctive entry in the horror canon. Audience familiarity with horror conventions allows the film to manipulate expectations effectively, generating suspense and surprise through both adherence to and subversion of established norms. The interplay of symbolic imagery, psychological motifs, and intertextual references is particularly evident in climactic sequences. For instance, when Finney and Gwen confront manifestations of the grabber in the camp's hidden sector, the environment itself becomes a reflection of fear, memory, and moral choice. Objects from the past appear in spectral forms, snow and shadow distort perception, and the Black Phone guides the siblings toward insight while simultaneously testing their resolve. These sequences are meticulously choreographed to ensure that every visual and auditory element contributes to thematic coherence, narrative tension, and emotional impact. The combination of symbolic, psychological, and intertextual layers ensures that the horror operates on multiple levels, engaging viewers intellectually, emotionally, and viscerally. The film also employs a deliberate rhythm in its scene composition, using alternating sequences of intense action and reflective introspection to reinforce thematic depth. Moments of quiet observation, such as Gwen deciphering the Black Phone's messages or Finney reflecting on prior encounters, provide space for character growth and audience engagement. These reflective interludes are interspersed with sudden, intense sequences of supernatural danger, creating a dynamic tension that sustains narrative momentum while allowing for thematic resonance. This rhythm reflects a sophisticated understanding of pacing, ensuring that suspense and psychological exploration complement rather than undermine each other, and that the narrative maintains cohesion across both plot-driven and thematic dimensions. The opening of Black Phone 2 begins quietly, establishing the passage of time since the events of the first film. Finney Blake wakes in his home in the early morning, the snow falling silently outside the windows. He moves slowly, pausing to examine objects that trigger memories of his captivity. The household is quiet, yet there is a subtle unease in the atmosphere. His father, Terence, is preparing breakfast, moving mechanically, a hint of fatigue etched in his movements. The breakfast table scene illustrates the continued tension in the family, where unspoken memories and past trauma linger in the air. Finney's gaze falls on an old, dust-covered rotary phone on a shelf, an object seemingly ordinary, yet charged with latent power. Gwen enters, bundled against the cold, her eyes revealing the restless sleep of a teenager haunted by dreams. She immediately begins recounting fragments of visions she experienced during the night. The dialogue here emphasizes her fear but also a determination that contrasts with Finney's initial hesitancy. The first major inciting event occurs when the black phone, previously disconnected, rings unexpectedly in their home. Its ring is sharp and sudden, echoing unnaturally in the silent house. Finney instinctively reaches for it, and the moment he does, the camera lingers on his face, showing both fear and recognition. Through the phone, the voice of a past victim communicates in whispers, urgent and broken, providing cryptic warnings about the Alpine Lake camp. Gwen watches in awe and fear as her brother interacts with the supernatural device. Their conversation reveals their understanding of the phone's role, linking past experiences to the current threat. This scene sets the tone for the film, blending suspense, psychological tension, and supernatural horror seamlessly. The decision to travel to Alpine Lake is gradual. Gwen insists, articulating visions of 3 boys in danger, while Finney wrestles with disbelief and concern for his sister's safety. Ernesto is brought into the conversation, initially skeptical but persuaded by Gwen's emotional urgency and Finney's growing concern. The dialogue reflects character development, showcasing Gwen's emerging leadership and Finney's protective instincts. Packing for the journey, the characters display small, intimate moments of preparation, Finney tightening the straps of his backpack, Gwen securing her notebook of visions, Ernesto checking flashlights and supplies. These moments ground the supernatural story in everyday reality, creating contrast that heightens tension when the horrors begin. As the trio approaches Alpine Lake, the environment itself begins to unsettle them. Snow falls heavily, obscuring the path, and wind gusts whisper through the trees in a way that suggests unseen presences. Finney notices footprints in the snow that appear and disappear, a visual cue of supernatural manipulation. The camp comes into view as a collection of cabins that appear familiar yet alien, a spatial distortion that subtly signals the presence of the grabber's residual influence. Early exploration reveals minor disturbances, doors slightly ajar, objects displaced, and the faint echo of children's laughter or cries that cannot be located. These elements heighten suspense and suggest the liminal space where reality and the supernatural intersect. Gwen begins to have more vivid visions, experiencing events from the perspective of the trapped boys. These visions are intense, blending sensory details of the snow, the camp's interior, and the presence of the grabber's spectral manifestations. Each vision adds urgency to their mission, providing clues but also imposing emotional strain. Finney attempts to anchor Gwen in reality, using tactile contact and calm dialogue to prevent her from being overwhelmed. Ernesto contributes practical reasoning, attempting to map the camp and anticipate physical hazards, illustrating the interplay between psychic insight and rational problem-solving. The narrative gradually introduces new supporting characters who add complexity and tension. Armando, the camp's supervisor, initially dismisses the warnings, emphasizing the need for order and adherence to rules. His niece, Mustang, becomes an important ally after witnessing inexplicable events, providing physical assistance and additional perspective on the camp layout. The interactions between the characters highlight themes of trust and collaboration, as differing viewpoints must be reconciled in the face of supernatural danger. These interactions also build suspense, as audience members are aware of threats that skeptical characters fail to recognize, creating dramatic irony. Midway through the story, the supernatural threat escalates. The trapped boy's experiences are revealed through alternating perspectives, showing fear, isolation, and manipulation by the ghostly presence of the grabber. He uses shadows, sound, and fleeting appearances to terrorize them, creating a psychological maze that mirrors the original film's basement environment but in a larger, more open spatial context. The trio's attempts to locate the boys are challenged by shifting corridors, sudden snow drifts, and disorienting echoes, reinforcing the liminality of the camp and the influence of residual evil. The black phone serves as the central device linking the living and the spirits of past victims. Gwen's psychic abilities allow her to communicate directly, extracting precise guidance on how to navigate the supernatural space. Scenes depict her concentration, hands hovering over the phone, eyes closed as she listens intently to the whispered instructions of children long deceased. The film visually represents this connection through subtle distortions of light, shadow, and sound, creating an immersive experience for the audience. The tension mounts as Gwen balances the need to act quickly with the risk of becoming overwhelmed by psychic feedback, illustrating her emotional resilience and the burden of inherited sensitivity. The climactic confrontation occurs within the deepest, most isolated section of Alpine Lake, a hidden part of the camp designed as a liminal space by the grabber's residual power. Shadows twist unnaturally, floors seem to shift, and spectral manifestations recreate the figure of the grabber in grotesque, fluid forms. Finney, Gwen, and Ernesto coordinate a multi-step approach, combining physical courage with spiritual strategy informed by the black phone's guidance. The trapped boy's fear is tangible, and each misstep risks both physical and psychological harm. The narrative sequences this confrontation with intercutting flashbacks, psychic visions, and immediate danger, heightening suspense and creating a layered climax that blends action, horror, and emotional resolution. After the climactic resolution of Black Phone 2, the narrative continues to explore the aftermath, emphasizing both character reflection and thematic resonance. Finney and Gwen, having survived the confrontation with the grabber's residual supernatural influence, begin to navigate the psychological consequences of their ordeal. The film devotes time to showing how trauma lingers even after immediate danger has passed. Scenes depict the siblings in quieter moments, sitting together in the camp's main hall or walking through snow-covered forests, sharing reflections and subtle gestures that convey relief, understanding, and emotional processing. These sequences are carefully framed with soft, natural lighting to contrast with the darker, high-tension scenes of earlier acts. Cinematically, the shift in visual tone signals both narrative closure and emotional reflection. Dialogue in these post-climactic sequences is intentionally subdued, with pauses and silences allowing the weight of prior events to resonate. Gwen occasionally references cryptic warnings or visions received via the black phone, acknowledging the lingering influence of past events while demonstrating her growth in interpreting and managing these supernatural signals. Finney, meanwhile, articulates a newfound sense of responsibility, not only for his sister's safety but for understanding the broader implications of confronting such malevolent forces. Secondary characters are also given attention in this denouement. Survivors from minor arcs who played pivotal roles in assisting the siblings are shown processing their experiences, reinforcing the film's thematic emphasis on interconnectedness and the consequences of actions under duress. These characters' responses, ranging from relief to contemplation, provide narrative balance and highlight the shared human experience of fear, resilience, and moral choice. Minor motifs introduced throughout the film are revisited and subtly expanded in these final sequences. The black phone, now silent, serves as a symbol of past guidance, unresolved trauma, and continuity across time. Shadows and reflections, recurring throughout the film, appear in quieter, contemplative ways, suggesting that while immediate threats have been neutralized, the psychological imprint of the grabber persists. Snow and ice continue to function as visual metaphors for isolation, clarity, and the potential for renewal, tying together environmental storytelling with thematic significance. The narrative also teases unresolved mysteries. While the grabber's immediate power has been diminished, subtle hints in the form of faint phone rings, distant noises, or unexplained movements suggest that the supernatural world retains its ambiguity. These cues maintain tension and interest for potential future installments while providing a realistic acknowledgement that trauma and danger often leave lasting shadows. One particularly poignant post-climactic scene involves Gwen revisiting a hidden space in the lodge, where she reflects on the experiences of the grabber's prior victims. Through a combination of apparitions, visual overlays, and auditory cues, the film communicates the ongoing presence of memory and loss, reinforcing the theme that survival does not erase history. These sequences highlight the moral and emotional weight of the protagonist's journey, emphasizing empathy, courage, and the importance of remembering those affected by evil. Cinematic techniques in these sequences include slower camera movements, extended close-ups, and ambient soundscapes that prioritize emotional resonance over jump scares. The deliberate pacing allows the audience to engage with character development, thematic reflection, and narrative cohesion, providing a sense of closure while maintaining the film's haunting atmosphere. Thematically, Black Phone 2 continues to explore resilience, morality, and the interplay between fear and courage. By emphasizing moments of reflection, the film underscores that confronting evil is not solely about physical survival but also involves psychological and ethical engagement. Characters demonstrate growth by processing trauma, making moral choices, and fostering trust and connection with others. Secondary and minor arcs reinforce these themes, illustrating that the impact of evil is far-reaching and that courage can manifest in multiple forms, from direct action to emotional perseverance. The resolution also pays homage to the franchise's overarching motifs. The black phone remains a central symbol, representing communication across time, the persistence of trauma, and the potential for guidance and insight even from beyond the immediate physical world. Its recurring presence, both during the climax and in post-climactic reflection, ensures continuity and reinforces the narrative's supernatural foundation. In terms of narrative structure, the film balances resolution with subtle ambiguity. While primary threats are neutralized and character arcs reach satisfying conclusions, minor supernatural cues and unresolved mysteries maintain narrative tension and franchise potential. This balance demonstrates narrative sophistication, ensuring that audiences are both satisfied and intrigued by the possibilities of continuation. Critical reception highlights the success of these sequences. Reviewers have noted that the film's attention to psychological realism, character development, and thematic depth distinguishes it from conventional horror sequels. The integration of minor motifs, secondary arcs, and post-climactic reflection enhances narrative cohesion and emotional impact, while cinematic techniques ensure a visually and orally immersive experience. Commercially, these narrative choices have contributed to audience engagement and repeat viewership, reinforcing the franchise's appeal. Ultimately, the post-climactic and reflective sequences in Black Phone 2 serve multiple functions. They provide emotional closure, deepen thematic resonance, honor secondary arcs, and maintain franchise potential. By combining visual storytelling, sound design, character development, and layered motifs, these scenes ensure that the film resonates on multiple levels: psychological, emotional, and intellectual, offering a sophisticated and compelling horror experience that transcends conventional genre limitations.